Hello, this is Jeffrey Kirk. Several years ago, I hosted a series of interviews called the Web Genius Summit. This is one of those interviews. Please note that any links provided in this recording are likely no longer useful as intended. Products mentioned may or may not be available, but lessons discussed in this video still apply. With that, I hope you enjoy this abridged episode of the Web Genius Summit.
Today we've got David Deutsch on the line. David is one of the top direct response marketing consultants and copywriters in the U.S. His writing has sold hundreds of millions of dollars worth of his clients' products, including everything from books, seminars and newsletters, to Maxwell House Coffee and Uniroyal tires. He started his advertising career at the renowned Ogilvy & Mather advertising agency on Madison Avenue and has the unique distinction of having been a creative director at both a traditional ad agency as well as a direct response direct mail agency. He has worked with all types of companies, from Fortune 500 companies such as Merrill Lynch, General Foods, and American Express, to small businesses and entrepreneurs. Today, he mainly writes for and consults with companies who sell information and advice in print, online, or through seminars. He's the author of some books, including $1 Million Marketing Secrets and Think Inside the Box, a book that reveals a revolutionary new way to generate ideas. And he's also the author of a course on memory improvement and co-author of a guidebook to Bermuda. That sounds really cool. Welcome, David. Anything you'd like to add to that intro?
Well, thank you, Jeffrey, for that intro. Stuff about myself that I've forgotten about. No, the only thing I'd probably add is that I've been doing some coaching lately, which I've really enjoyed, and teaching of copywriting. You know, it's something I've really just started doing more.
Good. Well, for our listeners, I just wanted to point out that when I first started thinking about putting this teleseminar series together, David is someone who came to the top of my mind. I thought of him right away. The reason is, a few years back, I had listened to and purchased a series that he put together, and it was on the subject of copywriting. And it was a marvelous teleseminar series. It was 18 interviews long, so even longer than the series of 12 we've got here. And I've worked with hundreds of businesses for their website needs, and I can say that copywriting is something that businesses are often doing wrong, or if wrong's not the right word, at least they're not doing it well. They're either trying to do it cheaply or just getting along poorly instead of learning to do it right or hiring to do it right. So, you know, copywriting is a problem, and that's why I wanted to get David on this call today. David, I'd like to start out actually by talking a little bit about your books, $1 Million Marketing Secrets and Inside the Box. But before we go there, I'd appreciate it if you could kind of set the stage for our listeners by defining the difference between direct response advertising and image advertising.
Yeah, sure. I'd be glad to do that. You know, I wanted to say something, too, in regard to what you were saying about the importance of copywriting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, copywriting is really just the whole way that your business interfaces with the rest of the world. And if that's not, you know, optimum, then everything else is obscured. You know, it's like a window pane. If you're a storekeeper and your front window is dirty and you can't see anything through it, it affects your whole business. And it's the same with copywriting.
Yeah, good point. Thanks.
To answer your question, though, about the difference between direct response and image advertising, direct response is really what it says. It's something that solicits a response. And image advertising is more, we want to get a certain image out to the world. We want to be portrayed in a certain way. We want people to think of us in a certain way. That's not to say that there's not some overlap in between the two, but I think a lot of businesses make the mistake of forgetting that advertising can and should elicit a measurable response. So why not put a coupon in your ad? Why not ask people to send for a free report? Why not do something that enables you to, A, measure your ad, and B, takes them to the next sequence, you know, toward a sale? Because after all, if they respond, you then get their name on a list where you can sell them more effectively.
Great. Yeah, that's something that I often hear is businesses talk about, well, we got to get our name out in the community. Got to get people to know who we are. And so they're more or less focused on that image and not on the direct response, not on getting someone to actually take some kind of action.
Really, I'd rather be rich and anonymous than well-known and poor. So.
Yeah, good point. I like that. Getting to your books, you originally wrote $1 Million Marketing Secrets back in the 90s, and I only read it for the first time a couple of years ago. I thought it was really good and absolutely still applicable. I had one other person in my company read it as well so that the two of us could discuss and brainstorm some ideas around it. I'm wondering, could you tell our listeners what led you to writing that book?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for your kind words about that book. I'm really kind of gratified when people tell me how applicable that book still is, even years later, and, how much they still continue to get out of it. What led me to writing it, I guess, I always feel like, there's got to be a shortcut to doing things. There's got to be a way to codify things. There's got to be a way to, list what's important and a way to explain what's important that people can follow. And, so I really wrote that book to kind of say, hey, these are the things that I use when I'm thinking about a client, when I'm trying to plan, when I'm writing, when I'm doing a marketing strategy. And, there's really not, I can't remember even how many there are now, 10 or 20 things, secrets, I call them in the book, to make it more appealing and sexy, that you need to really consider in order to have a marketing success. And so, obviously, it helped me to kind of organize my thinking and have a checklist to go by and think all those things through, and hopefully it helps people that read the book.
Great. Well, if you don't mind, I'd actually like to talk about a couple of the secrets that you bring up in the book, and I'm not going to ask you to recall by number, but okay. I'll pull out a couple that I thought were especially important for businesses that are working online. The first one you call actually secret number 3. It's base your marketing on unchanging human nature. I was wondering what you mean by that. What is unchanging human nature?
Well, that's a good question. Thank you for that. Unchanging human nature, I think, is just what makes people tick. And what makes people tick, even though obviously times change, the way people think to some extent changes, the basic things don't change. The basic desire that people have to be successful, to make money, to look good, to protect themselves and their family, to cure what ails them. Things like that don't really change, to do what's, in their best advantage to do. To be convinced, to need proof, to believe something. These are things that don't change, and I think people kind of tend to get a little lost in whatever the newest thing is, the newest insight into human nature, or the newest way of doing something, or the newest web technique for doing something. And they forget, what appeals to people is the same things that have appealed to people for years, and it's quantifiable and qualifiable, and you can see it. You can see from what people did in the past, and you can do the same thing. What Frank Kern does in terms of having a neat, attractive personality that is appealed to by people is something that personality-driven ads have done for hundreds of years. Well, maybe 100 years.
Good. How, as business people, many if not most of our listeners are business people that have their own business or they're entrepreneurs, and they're trying to get their web presence working for them. So how can knowing this, how can understanding unchanging human nature be applied to working on the web? Because that is something that's newer, yet, as you just said, those things, they're always present with us. Well,
I think you want to just do kind of a check and look at your website and say, am I appealing to basic human nature with this? Is there anything on it that tells people how to do something that they really want to do, whether it's make more money or protect their families or get something that they want to get? Or is it just about the company, and here's what we are, and here's why we're so great, and here's what we do, and blah, blah, blah. But it never talks about, or never appeals to, basic human needs in some way. And, and really anything can appeal to basic human needs. It's just a matter of helping the person see that by buying your product or by reading the stuff on your website, they'll do a better job at protecting their family, they'll make more money, or they'll be more fulfilled in their life in some way.
You mentioned the websites that talk about, we're the greatest, we do this, we do that, and that is certainly something that we see all the time. I think anybody can just go to Google, search for some topic, and just start looking at websites and which ones appeal to you and which ones don't, and take a look at who are those websites talking about. Are they talking about themselves, or are they talking about you, the visitor? And it just makes such a big difference.
Yeah, it really does. And it's not as blatant a thing as we make it out to be when we make fun and say, well, we're so great, we do this. It can be a subtle thing, too, just in terms of, how you say we and what we do and what I do instead of saying you. Maybe that's not subtle, But, it doesn't have to be like bragging, real blatant thing. So, I would urge people to really look at their websites from that point of view. Count the number of we's and I's and count the number of U's and make sure there's more U's than we's.
Yeah, good advice. Cool. One other secret that you brought up in the book that I thought I'd bring up today is number 14. Take the risk away from your customer. And what do you mean by that?
Well, that's such a powerful idea that obviously if you can take the risk away from someone buying something, they're a whole lot more likely to buy it. And there are ways of doing that beyond just saying, oh, we guarantee this. And so the stronger you can be about that, the more power your advertising is going to have. Maybe you don't just guarantee it. Maybe they don't even have to pay for it. Maybe you don't even bill them for 30 days. So you really let them try it at no risk. Part of that is a perceptual thing, too. It's one thing to say, oh, yeah, we have a guarantee. You can see it below or whatever. It's another thing to really talk about the guarantee in a way that people feel like you've taken the risk away from them, really feel like you're going to stand behind your product, and really feel that if they don't like it, if there's something wrong with it, if for whatever reason they're dissatisfied, they really feel like you will give them their money back without a hassle.
How would a business get someone to feel that way?
Well, by doing more than just saying, we have a money-back guarantee. That's one level. Another level is saying, we have a money-back guarantee. We don't want you to be unhappy. First of all, by saying, we believe so strongly in our product, we have a money-back guarantee. And we have that because we simply don't want any unhappy customers. Unhappy customers are just bad for our business. So if you're dissatisfied for any reason, for no reason at all, just write to me personally, let me know, here's the number to call, and we will get a check right out to you for 100% of your money. There's a big difference between that and just saying, yeah, we got a money-back guarantee.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So now you really feel like there's a person behind it. You feel like there's some sincerity behind it, too. Mm-hmm. You say, they're right. They don't want unhappy customers. That makes sense.
Yeah, we can all relate to that. None of us want unhappy customers.
Right.
So how, again, taking this concept and applying it to doing business online, is it just as simple as putting those words on a web page, or is there more to it?
Well, it can be. Certainly the words are important. When you're dealing with a web page, you're dealing with something that's a lot more visual, and you're working in a whole other dimension in terms of pages and in terms of links and where you can go and things like that. And there's a lot you can do visually with emphasizing your guarantee on a web page that you may not be able to do on paper. So when you click on the order form, the guarantee should be right there. In addition to being in the sales letter, if you have a sales letter, you could have little bursts about how our product is guaranteed.
Okay, good. Well, in your book, you actually have 20 different secrets, and they're all very good. Any business, in my opinion, can benefit by understanding those secrets. But you don't actually sell this book anymore, right?
No,
Okay.
It's been out of print for a while.
Okay. But my understanding is a little later in the call, we're going to talk about something that you do sell, and you're going to throw this book in as a bonus for our listeners who take you up on your offer.
Yeah, I really wanted to do that for your participants in this summit because you speak so highly of the book. It seems to have helped you that I thought it would be great to be able to get people a copy of it. I would emphasize that in making the book, a bonus for the creativity course that I sell, that there's nothing about that on the page for the creativity course.
Okay.
That this is really special for your group. So if they do, eventually purchase my creativity course, they would need to send an email to support and just let me know, and then I'll send them out a copy of the book.
Okay, awesome. I will include that email address in the info I give out to people, too. That's awesome, David. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Now, let's fast forward, bring us closer to the present.
Okay.
I don't know exactly when you wrote your newer book, but I'm thinking probably about 10 years had elapsed between them. Your newest book, Think Inside the Box, really kind of gets into creating ideas to help move businesses forward. What led you to creating this book?
Well, again, it's the same kind of motivation that there were things that I wanted to understand better about, in this case, creativity. My business is coming up with ideas, as it were, whether that's ideas for marketing a product, ideas for products, and especially for ideas for persuading people with words to buy products and to take certain actions. So the better I can come up with ideas, the more successful I'm going to be in what I'm trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
And, I investigated a lot of different ways of how people come up with ideas and found a system that was very beneficial to me, that was step-by-step kind of a way of looking at things through certain filters that I call them boxes in this case, so it becomes think inside the box, that just triggers ideas.
Okay, interesting. So is that then what the book really is about then? It's about this system of idea generation?
Yeah, exactly. The book is one part of the $1 Million Ideas program, which is the book and some CDs and a workbook. And the book itself is in like a story form, like 1 Minute Manager.
Oh, okay.
Kind of thing. So if I do say so myself, it's an interesting way of getting across the method, this method of coming up with ideas. So people can see it in action, as it were.
Sure. So like 1 Minute Manager, then it's characters in a story?
Exactly.
Playing it out? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, one of the things that's included with the course is actually a kind of a book on tape version of it.
Oh, interesting. Neat. So you talk about generating more ideas and better ideas, and you even use the phrase $1 million ideas. Could you talk about one of those idea generating techniques so that we get a better understanding of where you're going in the book?
Sure. One of the ideas is the idea of, let's say, bringing things together. How do you bring together two disparate things to make one really good idea? And, of course, that's a lot of times, you'll do that in copy. It's a handy technique for copy. A friend of mine, Joe Vitale, was telling me about a book that he had written about P.T. Barnum, and it was a book about P.T. Barnum from a marketing point of view. And he asked me to come up with a title for it. So I thought about, okay, what can I combine together to make a title for this, was one of the things that I was kind of looking at. And so I said, well, maybe one of the things I can bring to bear is some of the things that P.T. Barnum has said. He was a very quotable guy. And, one of the things that came to mind was, there's a sucker born every minute. So I took out sucker and put in customer and came up with there's a customer born every minute. And so that became the title of Joe's book and went on to be pretty successful.
Wow, and that seems totally logical.
Well, that's what I like about this. I'm a very logical guy, so creativity can be hard for me sometimes. And so this kind of forces me to think creatively in a logical way by saying, okay, what can you bring together? One of the things is doing the opposite. There's a very famous, there was a headline that someone did for a get-rich-quick program. No, it wasn't a get-rich-quick program, but it was like a stock thing, an investment program. And it was get rich slowly. That was a very interesting example of doing the opposite of what you expect in order to get people's attention in a unique way and get your point across. When everyone's saying get rich quick, if you say get rich slowly, that's a pretty appealing thing in itself.
Even your title, Think Inside the Box, then, is kind of fits that mold.
See that? I find an idea, I use it. My golly, I get all the mileage I can out of it.
Absolutely, why not?
So I think there are 15 boxes like that of things that you can do to look at a problem, to look at an opportunity, and play around with it, as it were, to come up with a solution.
And that's kind of neat, I think, because when you meet people, oh, that guy's he's really creative, and I'm not very creative. So, I can't do this. I'm going to have somebody else do it for me. And I think you're kind of saying, well, not necessarily. If you believe yourself uncreative, you can still follow certain steps.
Exactly.
Okay.
I'll tell you something that people could do immediately without knowing the 15 boxes, whatever. To be more creative, just come up with more ideas. And don't worry about whether they're good or bad. Like if you want to come up with a headline, if you want to come up with an idea for a product, if you want to come up with whatever it is, solve a problem. Just think of 100 ways to do it. Write down 100 ways to do it. And don't even worry about whether they're good or bad. Just write them down as quickly as you can. They could be the most absurd thing in the world. To solve the problem with my mother-in-law, I could shoot her. Just put that down as one of the ideas. Doesn't matter. And in the course of coming up with 100 ideas, you're bound to come up with a couple of them that are really good.
Sure.
But people never get through those. The first 10 will probably be pretty bad. And then by the time you get to number 20, sometimes it takes a little while. Just kind of get the flow going, get your brain going.
Sure. A tendency might be to get stuck and give up.
Yeah. But it's really important to give yourself permission to come up with bad ideas.
Okay.
And a lot of times, even a bad idea will trigger a good idea. It's like, well, I may not be able to shoot my mother-in-law, but I could send her on a vacation to Fiji, and she'd really like that, and then she'd be gone.
Right.
You know, but people are afraid to say a bad idea, or what they think is a bad idea.
Yeah, curious. Oh, that's neat.
So if you just close down that censor, you can really do some amazing things.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're very deliberate about, okay, I will come up with 25 ideas or 50 ideas or whatever.
Uh-huh. So how do we take these concepts, your million-dollar marketing secret, and these million-dollar ideas, and actually work that back into coming up with some kind of meaningful copy that's going to help sell something?
Well, you know, I think you start at the beginning. You need to start by not so much even coming up with copy as coming up with an approach or coming up with a positioning for your product. People just start writing copy, and they don't really have a strategy behind it. And I think that, first of all, you've got to put the marketing secrets and those principles, you know, appealing to human nature, guaranteeing, giving something away for free is, I think, another one of the secrets. Just say, okay, strategically, you know, how can I do something like that? How can I incorporate these things? How can I make my product appeal to people's basic needs instead of just trying to get them to buy my product by saying how great it is?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and then how can I do that creatively? Domino's Pizza wanted to get across the fact that they were pretty fast in delivering their pizza. And there's a lot of ways they could have done that. But they came up with Domino's Pizza, 30 minutes or it's free. That incorporated a lot of the things that we're talking about. It incorporated the whole idea of a guarantee right into their whole strategy. It incorporated basic human nature, which is that people want instant gratification. That hasn't changed since the caveman. You know, he didn't want to sit around and wait for things, and we don't like sitting around waiting for things either. It appealed to the desire to get things for free, which probably hasn't changed since the caveman either. And it was done in a creative way, a simple guarantee as their tagline, as their promise, 30 minutes or it's free.
Yeah, powerful. You know, you mentioned giving away something for free, and that just triggers the thought in my mind that I've heard from people saying, well, we're a business, we don't give stuff away for free, we're trying to make money here. You know, how do you get over that mental
And isn't it
block?
good that so many people think that? Because it just creates such opportunity for the people that can get beyond thinking that way, you know?
Mm-hmm.
You know, people are funny. Well, now I'm not talking about the people who think that way, but, you know, consumers type people like you and I. The more you give us, the more we want from you. You know, some of the most successful people on the Internet, like Frank Kern, for instance, I brought him up before. You know, he gives away a ton of stuff. He gives away a ton of ideas. He gives away a ton of strategy. You could take what he gives you and go run with it and do some pretty good things. But people want more because they've either heard what he's said and they've seen for themselves, like, yeah, that's pretty good stuff, or else they've tried it and it's worked, and they know it's pretty good stuff and they want more. And it's, you know, the same for any business. You know, the more you give people, the more you help people, you know, the more they want from you, because the whole thing of reciprocity, they feel sort of obligated. But there's the whole thing of proof, too, that they feel like you've proven yourself.
Sure. Yeah, that makes good sense. Awesome. Well, if we were to take these ideas and getting this stuff turned into good copy, and that's, I mean, in my mind, that's where you're at. You're in that realm of writing good copy. Take that to the Internet. There's really two things that a website needs in order to be successful. One is traffic. You've got to get people there. But the other is the conversion side. And for our listeners, what I mean by that is that it's getting people to take the action that you want them to take after they arrive at your site. And most of the time, it's the copy that gets them to do that. So, David, how do we apply your approach to business websites and to help them get more and better conversion rates?
Well, I think there's 15 boxes in here of things you can do to an idea, to a headline, to anything, to change it and make it different and create solutions and strategies from it. And, you know, what I would do is just to take whatever you've got now, whatever headline you've come up with, and apply each of these 15 things to it. In other words, we talked about bringing things together. Okay, what can I add to this headline? What can I take from somewhere else and bring to this headline that's going to make it different? And then test that. You know, we talked about doing the opposite. Okay, so my headline says X. Well, how can I say the opposite of X and test that and see how that works? You know, like the person did with Get Rich Slowly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're still kind of saying the same basic thing. You're saying get rich, but you've kind of taken it to the opposite and approached it from a different way.
Good. And one of the nice things about working with websites is so much of this is testable. You can measure and compare and see how one performs against another.
Yeah, I mean, I think you always need to be testing, especially from a copy point of view.
Mm-hmm.
You always need to be testing one thing against another.
As a professional copywriter, you're up against that all the time, aren't you?
Well, yes. My clients are always testing what I do against something else because they want copy that's going to work the best and it's going to be the most profitable.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of this Darwinian test what I do against what someone else does, and then the winner of that is what they call the control. Then test something else against that, and then the winner of that is the new control. And you keep having this survival of the fittest. So by the end, you've got this monster, powerful control that's hopefully unbeatable.
Wow.
And, of course, anyone can do that with their own website. Just keep testing things, trying to beat your own control. And what you've got now is your control. That's the best. And so keep trying to do better than that.
And if it's doing nothing at this moment in time, then the bar is set pretty low.
True enough. It's hard to multiply zero.
Yeah.
But certainly if it's doing something, you can multiply that by improving. And then the most powerful way to do that, from my prejudice point of view, is by improving the copy.
Yeah, good. I do want to give you a chance to actually talk more about your, what you call your $1 Million Ideas system. And that's your creativity course with Think Inside the Box, which is part of that, and you're going that extra step and throwing in the $1 Million Marketing Secrets. Why don't we take a few minutes now and you can tell us more about that course and what's in it for our listeners, and it'll help them move forward.
Okay, sure. Well, as we said, it's it consists of the book Think Inside the Box, which in a story form enumerates the 15 different boxes that you can look at problems and opportunities through to generate ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And there's what I call the book on, even though nothing's on tape anymore, kind of the book on tape version of that, where the story is actually acted out. And it's really well done, too, by some professional actors. And so that's pretty cool. You don't even have to read the book. You can just pop it into your CD player in your car or whatever.
It's the same text?
Same text.
As if you read it? Okay.
And there's a workbook which kind of gives you some help in terms of actually putting all this to work and applying it, and, with some exercises. And there's also a interview with me about the techniques and how I've used them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all digital online you can get it immediately, which is kind of neat because, as we discussed, people like instant gratification.
Right.
So I always like when I don't have to wait for something to come. I can just get it right away. And
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it's been pretty enthusiastically received by people and helped a lot of people come up with ideas for their businesses and, even in their lives, because it's not just, after all, in your business that you need ideas. It's in your life, too. You need ideas for communicating better with people. You need ideas for, how to bring more happiness into your life or how to deal with a problem in your life. So, people have used it in that way, too.
That's neat. So then it's quite versatile. It's
quite versatile, yes. Well, being able to solve problems, being able to come up with ideas I think is just so helpful in so many ways. And, the whole thing now of how we're in an idea economy, we're in a creative economy. If something doesn't require creativity and thinking and coming up with ideas, it can pretty easily be outsourced to India or something. Not that there's anything wrong with that, as they say, but, it's much harder to outsource coming up with ideas or being creative, within an environment. If you're a person that can solve problems, you can't outsource solving problems for a business.
Right. Yeah, you're the one who does it.
Yeah, you're the one who does it, or, it's got to be someone within the company that does that. So,
yeah.
So that just being able to come up with ideas and solve problems just becomes, I think, more important than ever these days.
Yeah.
Where everything else has just become kind of commoditized. You can get people to write programming. You can get people to sort data. You can get people to do all that stuff. But you can't outsource coming up with ideas. That should be my tagline. You can't outsource coming up with ideas.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Good work. Test it.
Yeah, of course.
I think about where we are in the economy as well, and not to say that one particular economic climate is better or worse for ideas than another, but just thinking about where we are now, maybe the bottom is behind us and things are going to be booming again. The environment with businesses and their competitors, many of their competitors may be gone.
Mm-hmm.
Those that are still around may want to be able to take it up to the next level, and those ideas are what's going to propel them.
Well, that's a very good point. In a time like this when so much is in flux, when there's so much, in a way, even though you could look at it negatively and say, oh, there's a lot of problems in the economy and this and that, it also presents a lot of opportunity for a company that's clever enough to exploit sounds like such a negative word, but to exploit the economic situation. So come up with a better way of doing something, a less expensive way of doing something. To come up, all those things take ideas.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great point you just made, too, is I often think about ideas for more ways to sell something or ideas for more things to sell. But you just mentioned ideas for a way to spend less, essentially. That's kind of looking at it the opposite.
Yeah, right.
How can you save money instead of necessarily generating more?
Ideas are about solving problems, and
Mm-hmm.
now there's problems to be solved. And one of them is people not having a lot of money and people being more concerned about money.
Mm-hmm.
So that creates opportunities for companies that address that, or people that address that in an entrepreneurial way.
Right.
Because I know a lot of people on the call are not, maybe they're not working for a company, but they want to start a business.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's just such opportunity for that right now because there's so many needs, there's so many problems that people have that need to be solved. That's a much better way to look at it than, it's a difficult economy and all that stuff.
Right. Another factor for those who are listening who are also business owners, they may have downsized a bit over the last couple of years, and that will end at some point and go in the other direction, and
Right.
coming up with ideas of how do we creatively bring on new people without setting ourselves back for a while might be another
Mm-hmm.
consideration.
Yeah, there's so much opportunity for that.
Mm-hmm.
So much opportunity for good thinking and good ideas. It's really just such an edge, such an advantage that people can have, and so few people take advantage of it. So few people train themselves to really think systematically and deeply and creatively. And that's really what this is about. We call it creativity, but in a way it's really thinking. It's thinking about a problem or about an opportunity and generating solutions, generating strategies,
Mm-hmm.
and generating copy, of course.
Right. Are you okay taking some questions from people?
Sure, as long as they're not hard or anything.
Okay. Well, if you're listening in on the webcast and you've got a question, you can use the box on the lower left-hand side. Just enter it there, and I'll read it. We actually have a question in there already, and it is related to providing a guarantee. It says, how does a small business do this? People use the product and then say they don't like it, and when we take it back, it is obviously used. It can be expensive to do this. How would you comment?
Well, it's hard without knowing the product specifically, but
Mm-hmm.
You got to take a risk that some people are going to take advantage of you, and there's always going to be some people that do.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no denying that the more you guarantee something, the higher your return rate is going to be. You just need to figure out that what your return on investment is. Your ROI. Are you making
Sure.
more money by doing that?
Mm-hmm.
Some people get real, like, my returns are up 5% or whatever. Well, yes, but your profits are up 800%. Yeah, but my returns are up 5%, and it makes me crazy. Well, okay, if you'd rather not be made crazy by too many returns than make a lot of money, that's kind of up to you. But that's part of the equation, really.
Sure.
And it is a risk, and that's the advantage that people have when they do it, is not everyone's going to do it because
Mm-hmm.
they don't want to be taken advantage of. They're afraid they're going to be taken advantage of. And even they may be taken advantage of. But see what happens,
Right.
when you do that.
It
I
does
don't know that.
differentiate.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm asking his question exactly, too.
Uh-huh.
If he's getting a lot of people that use it and then return it, then he may really need to look into, why people are doing that. Are they not happy with the product? Are they dissatisfied in some way? Is it too expensive? If people feel something is overpriced, then they're a whole lot more likely to return it, after they've used it and say they weren't happy with it.
Mm-hmm.
So it may be kind of necessary in his case to take a good hard look at some things and even talk to people that have returned it and say, hey, I just wanted to know what you weren't happy with or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've got a hand raised here, and for those of you on the calls, you can raise your hand and ask a question. You just need to hit *2 on your handset. I'm going to put this one on. I believe it's the same person who entered the question on the webcast, so we might get some clarification here. Can you hear me? You're on?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah. I think you pretty much answered the question, but, the product that we sell is for events. So people may have an event and they buy the product. They use it for the event, and then now they don't want to keep it because they're done, and then they want to return it and say, oh, it's defective or something. And when we get it back, we know they've used it and it's really not defective. And we're a small business, and sometimes it's kind of hard to take that kind of loss because you're paying the freight back and forth.
Sure.
And so we do stand behind the product if it's defective. If there's a problem with the product, we automatically send replacements and all of that. But when the product is not defective, then we don't take it back. We do have a restocking fee and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I was trying to gauge is how much do you put yourself out? And like you said, I think you answered it by saying that, you have to weigh the advantages versus disadvantages. And so far in business, we've done okay with the return policy. We haven't had many issues. But I just thought, maybe there is something else that we are missing.
Well, yeah, and that's a good question. One thing, there's no reason that the guarantee has to be use it, and then when you're done with it, if you're not happy, send it back. The guarantee could be within the first hour of using it if you're not happy, or first day, the first, whatever. In other words, you can create any limits that you want on that guarantee.
Mm-hmm.
You can require anything you want. If you require a written explanation of why they didn't like it, that'll put a lot of people off from sending for a refund.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing we have. We have within 7 days if you call, or sometimes we'll waive the 20% depending on the customer. But I was just thinking, is there something that we could be doing differently that we are missing? But I think you pretty much covered it.
The other thing you can do is to make the product be more than just the thing that they use, whether there's some ongoing consulting or something like that would end if they asked for their money back.
Yeah, unfortunately, the product is not a heck of a lot to do with it. But,
right.
But I think over the years, product is really good, so people really like the product. So the returns have gone down, and we are finding less abuse as the product has improved and they can't find it elsewhere.
Well, that's good. That's great.
Still, I'm just thinking in terms of how can we do something better than what we are doing right now.
Right. Well, it may not be in terms of the guarantee. There's exceptions to everything.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly a product that gets completely used up, there can be some challenges to that in terms of guaranteeing it. Yeah. And so, as we've discussed, maybe just find other things, other aspects of it that you can guarantee or time frames.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. All right. On the webcast, David, I think this question is coming from someone you may know named Brian McLeod.
Oh, okay.
And he's asking, who are your favorite copywriters? Sounds like a very biased kind of question or answer.
Really? Gary Benzavenga, who you may know.
Mm-hmm.
I like Clayton's work a lot, Clayton Makepeace, the emotional content of his writing.
Yeah.
My friend Jim Rutz has a very amazing logical content and intelligence to his writing and creativity, too. Jim comes up with some wild ideas sometimes that are hugely successful. People that aren't with us anymore, like Gene Schwartz and, of course, Claude Hopkins, that really everyone should read his books and his ads. They're just so clear and powerful, as they should read Gene Schwartz's books and Clayton's, materials and Gary's stuff. Yeah, so those are from those. Yeah, my friend Paris Lampropoulos, tremendously successful and good copywriter. Making me nervous now that I'm leaving out, because I'm leaving out people.
Well, we'll forgive you for that.
Jim Punchrey, another wonderful writer.
Uh-huh.
Arthur Johnson, who's maybe a little less well known but tremendously successful in the the magalogs and in infomercials now that he's done.
Good, yeah, some good names in that group. A number I haven't heard of, but a number that I have and have read some of their stuff, so I know that that's great.
Yeah. If you really want to learn copywriting, it's so good to know different styles
Mm-hmm.
and take from those different styles and see which one appeals to you.
Mm-hmm.
John Carlton, how could I leave out John?
Yeah, yeah.
Because there's something to be learned from everyone.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, thank you. I have another question for you, and it's something I always put in at the end of these Web Genius Summit calls. Because what I'm trying to do, the purpose I'm trying to serve here is really kind of help people put the pieces together. They've got a business, or they're part of a business, or they're thinking about starting a business, and no matter where they are in that, doing something online is part of it. So trying to help them do better in that regard. So based on what we've talked about today, the different marketing concepts, your books, the $1 Million Idea System, what's something that you would recommend that our listeners can do today, take some action right now that's going to help them move their business forward to more success and more profit?
Well, I think take some action is the key. I'm a big believer in just doing something.
Mm-hmm.
I think too many people think about doing things, and the way you learn what to do is really by doing. I don't think I've ever really learned what I should do in any other way other than by trying it and seeing if it works or not. If there's someone that doesn't have a website up yet, I would say get something up is the most important thing you can do. I don't care if it's a blog. I don't care if you're giving away a free report. Get something up and start taking names. Start selling something, even if you sell it as an affiliate. Start getting used to the idea of money flowing and orders flowing and building up lists and things and how all this stuff works, rather than trying to figure out, okay, what's the best thing that I can do? What kind of a business do I want?
Mm-hmm.
Don't let it. Go on ClickBank, find a product, and be an affiliate for it and sell that product. Create a website for it, do whatever. If you've got something up already, like we talked about before, I think the most important thing you can do today is split test something. Whatever you're doing, test something different, see if it works better or not. If it doesn't work any better, test something else tomorrow or next week or whatever. See if that works better.
Sure.
And, don't just test, the headline or the copy. I think we talked about headlines and copy. Test your offer. Would this work better if I gave a free report along with it? Will I make more money if I sold it for a lesser price, for a higher price? Would I make more money if I had a stronger guarantee?
Mm-hmm.
Test all that stuff.
Yeah, those are all good. And I think that to kind of summarize, we talked about generating tons of new ideas, but really those ideas don't do anyone any good if they're just ideas floating around in your head. You actually have to do something with them.
Well, that's definitely true. The whole second part of this is that, you have to take action.
Mm-hmm. Good. So those of you listening now or in the future, take action. All right. Well, I think we did pretty good. So,
well, great. That was quick.
Yeah, it was. Our time is officially coming to an end then. David, it was my pleasure having you on the line with us. I'm so glad that you were able to do this and take some time out of your schedule to be here.
Well, it's my pleasure being here. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, great. Best wishes to you, and for everyone listening in on the call, thanks for being here as well, and have a great evening.